Today's story from the Mahabharata is about how the Pandavas managed to get out of the frying pan and out of the fire when Duryodhan gave them a shiny palace, Lakshagraha, as a gift. Welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narad Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you fascinating stories from the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. Today's story begins shortly after the last Mahabharata episode. But if you haven't heard it, that's perfectly okay. I try to keep all my episodes standalone. With that in mind, let me give you a summary of the story so far. The Mahabharata is one of the two greatest epics from India, the other being the Ramayana, which we have also covered. The Mahabharata started with Bhishma, who was the crown prince of Hastinapur. Though a very capable crown prince, Bhishma promised that he would not marry or have any children. He did this just so that his father could marry Satyavati, a ferry operator. He also promised that Satyavati's unborn children would be the ones who would occupy the throne. And that's exactly what happened. Bhishma helped govern, but from the sidelines. Satyavati's children and then grandchildren faced tragedy after tragedy. And that left Satyavati and Bhishma clutching at straws, trying to pick a successor to the throne. Dhritarashtra was born blind. He wouldn't have qualified ordinarily, but he became the ruler after his younger brother Pandu gave up the throne. Dhritarashtra's role was a largely ceremonial one. Bhishma did most of the actual administration, as he had sworn to do, in support of whoever sat on the throne. The confusion arose in the following generation. Dhritarashtra had over 100 children, and Pandu had passed away, leaving behind 5 sons and 1 widow. All of Dhritarashtra's and Pandu's children were physically healthy, and each was fully qualified to be emperor. The problem which faced them now was the opposite of what had happened in the previous generations. Now, they had too many contenders for the throne. Should Pandu's son Yudhishthir rule because he was the eldest of them all? Or should Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhan rule instead? He was, after all, the eldest son of the current emperor. Maybe they should have done what the World Wrestling Entertainment does. They should have just staged a Royal Rumble type of an event. Put everyone in the wrestling arena, and the last man standing gets to be emperor. But what do I know? Maybe that only works when all the wrestlers are just paid actors. Anyway, the Pandavas and the Kauravas grew up under the tutelage of first Kripacharya and later Dronacharya. As they grew up, each prince found something to be passionate about. Arjun, the Pandav, was the expert archer. Bhim, also a Pandav, and Duryodhan were each the strongest amongst their siblings. Yudhishthir favored the spear, and Nakul and Sahadev, who were the other two Pandavas, were experts with horses. It's too tedious to enumerate what the other 100 Kauravas were passionate about. So let's skip past all that. Those other Kauravas were inconsequential anyway. They always followed Duryodhan's lead. There was just one more person I should mention, and that was Duryodhan's friend, Karna. He was secretly a Pandav, but no one knew that, Karna included. The only one who knew that was his mother, Kunti. And she kept her mouth shut to avoid making the front page of every gossip magazine, because Karna had been born out of an incident that she was not proud of. We'll continue the story at the point where the princes have all graduated Dronacharya University, and they were all ready to get into the administrative action. They had even had a practical exam of sorts in defeating Dronacharya's enemy. It did not sit well with Dhritarashtra that the Pandavas had succeeded while the Kauravas had not. During a council meeting, Dhritarashtra expressed how convinced he was that the Pandavas must have cheated. Vidur was Dhritarashtra's half-brother, but he was never in the running for the throne because his mother was a maid. Classism made it impossible for him to rule, despite being fully qualified otherwise. He was also a lot more reasonable than Dhritarashtra, though no one ever said that part out loud. Vidur patiently explained that it was impossible to cheat against an enemy on the battlefield. Dhritarashtra, stubborn as usual, refused to back down. "And how do you know that, Vidur?" "It happened in this movie that Narad told me about the other day. It was called Braveheart, and it's about this Scottish guy who was battling the English for independence. And then on the battlefield, they cheated against him." Vidur, ever the practical one, countered politely, "Your Majesty, if you heard it from Narad, it very likely never happened. That guy is always spinning a yarn." While Vidur was accurate in that the battle hadn't happened, I have to say, in my defense, it was only because it hadn't happened yet. The Mahabharata was so much earlier than William Wallace's story. "You're just trying to distract me," Dhritarashtra said. "I want to put an end to this. I declare Duryodhan to be the next king." "That's not wise, Your Highness," Vidur said. "The economy will crash. Emigration will hit an all-time high. Our neighboring trading partners will want to renegotiate all our contracts. Our weapons contractors, they'll charge extra for every sword they manufacture." "All right, zip it, Vidur," Dhritarashtra said. "Uncle Bhishma, what do you think?" "That's none of my business," Bhishma said. "I'm just going to serve whoever sits on the throne." The others on the council hesitated to speak frankly, as Vidur had. Ultimately, Dhritarashtra decided to hold a vote amongst all his courtiers. Vidur went through with it reluctantly. and only because it was a direct order. Reluctantly, because he knew what was going to happen. The results shocked the emperor, but they shocked no one else. There were 356 votes for Yudhishthir, and 3 for Duryodhan, and 1 abstain. The abstain was obviously from Bhishma, and of the 3 votes for Duryodhan, 1 had to obviously be from Dhritarashtra himself. Of the other 2, Vidur was pretty sure that it was from a couple of courtiers who could neither read nor write. Just as Vidur anticipated, Dhritarashtra complained that there had been massive election fraud. It was all because of those mail-in ballots and all those fake voters. Vidur politely reminded the emperor that he had himself vetoed the bill that would have tightened election security. Dhritarashtra mumbled and grumbled about how he was always treated unfairly by everyone, especially the mainstream media, as he called it. But he had to abide by his own rules of law. Yudhishthir would be named next in line. The emperor cursed himself and decided that he should never have let it come to a vote. Maybe a Hunger Games style tournament or a WWE style Royal Rumble would have been best. Duryodhan could be secretly aided by a chair when the referee wasn't looking. Duryodhan was naturally furious with his father's decision. This throne was supposed to be handed to him on a platter. Well, not literally, but you get the idea. That night, the Kaurav Secret Club, GROUP, met to take decisive action. We've come across this club before, back in middle school when they attempted to get rid of Bhim. It stands for Get Rid of Uppity Pandavas. The only difference this time was that they had a new recruit, Purochan. And Purochan had brought an idea to the club meeting. He had also brought along samosas, which helped break the ice with some Kauravs. And I don't mean that the samosas were so hard that they could crush ice literally. I just mean that some Kauravs were reluctant to expand their club membership beyond their siblings. Duryodhan pointed out that Karna wasn't their brother, and he was in the club. So why not Purochan? That, of course, meant that everyone was suddenly okay with it. If Duryodhan said something, his brothers accepted that without question. That's why, when the unspoken question in their minds was finally asked, it was Karna who asked it. I'm part of this club because I'm the best archer in the kingdom. I got here on merit. What does Purochan bring to the table? Dushasan's hand shot up. I know the answer to that. He's brought samosas, and they are delicious, I must admit. Duryodhan shook his head. What was he going to do when he was surrounded by this crowd? Maybe the court's verdict was a result of a direct comparison between his brothers and Yudhishthir's brothers. But for better or for worse, Duryodhan was stuck with this crew. Maybe quantity would make up for quality. As it was, things were really starting to look up since Karna got inducted. Their average intelligence went up. Their club meetings were more efficient and focused on the ultimate goal. Purochan promised to be another such inductee. Calmly, Duryodhan agreed with Dushasan. Purochan's samosas were indeed amazing, but there was something more remarkable about him. Purochan was an architect, and in a past life, literally, he had been a general in Ravan's army. But that was less important. Let's focus on the architecture bit. Yes, indeed, Purochan said. I have the most cunning plan. Behold, my new clubmates, I've something else to reveal. He brought forward something that was wrapped in a sheet. Purochan set it down on the table and removed the sheet with a flourish, and stood there, glowing with pride. That's a cake shaped like a palace? One Kaurav said. Another added that they could see he was combining his talents. That's not the point, Purochan protested. It's a scale model of a palace I'm going to construct. But it's also a cake, the Shasan said. Is it carrot cake? We can see the frosting and the happy birthday written on it. Oh, all right. Yes, it's a cake, the architect replied. And yes, we'll cut it and eat it. But first you have to listen to my most cunning plan. If you want to get attention, that's the way to do it. To dangle a carrot. Or in this case, a carrot cake. Purochan explained that he was going to construct the palace for the Pandavas as a gift. Do you see how brilliant my plan is? Sometimes I amaze myself. Again, it was Karna who asked the unspoken and important question. How does giving the Pandavas a palace constitute an evil plan? The architect slapped his forehead. Oh, I knew I'd forgotten to mention something. All the palace material is extremely flammable. Once they are all inside, you know how accidents might happen, right? A carelessly lit agarbatti. Even an accidentally dropped candle. I see what you're doing, Purochan, the Shasan said. But it won't work. You're still depending on chance. What if no one drops a candle or an agarbatti? Duryodhan was an inch from tearing his hair out. But thankfully, Karna broke in. But the Shasan, suppose we do drop a candle on purpose. The coroner's report can still say that the candle was accidentally dropped. Oh, don't tell me. I got it, the Shasan exclaimed. What if we deliberately light the palace on fire? A simple torch should do it. And because Purochan is the one who's constructing it, he can create some dark spots where no CCTV cameras or security guards will lurk. It's perfect. The Pandavas will be gone, all of them at one stroke. And then Duryodhan will be our king. Your plan had a reasonable foundation, Purochan. Not quite there. But stick with me, and with time and training, you'll learn to think like me. Purochan shuddered at the thought, but he was distracted because at that point, they did cut the cake. Things went smoothly with the palace construction after that. The Pandavas were naturally suspicious about this gift, but they could not refuse it. And they would have to spend at least a few days in this palace. On the outside, it looked beautiful. Yudhishthir thought that Duryodhan had actually turned the corner and was genuinely extending an olive branch towards them. How could they suspect him of doing something sinister here? Bhim replied that sinister was exactly the way to describe it. Twice, twice he attempted to take my life when we were in school, for goodness sake. He's certainly not gotten any friendlier. Arjun said that he had to agree with Bhim. The Kauravas had only seemed to get more ruthless since they inducted Karna into their secret club. Nakul and Sahadev just shrugged their shoulders. They didn't really have an opinion either way. At this point, Vidur joined them. Boys, I have some not so great news for you. I think that palace that Duryodhan is having constructed for you is a death trap. I told you so, Bhim shouted. But Yudhishthir wanted to hear the evidence, if Vidur had any. Vidur said, "Oh, it was just a hunch." He had only noticed it by accident when reviewing Purochan's construction budget. Purochan had ordered 10,000 tons of ghee. Yudhishthir speculated that maybe Purochan really liked making sweets, or maybe it was to cook and feed his workers. But Vidur had more. There was this blueprint that he had found, which showed that the palace was being made with all kinds of inflammable materials. But Yudhishthir had a counter explanation for that too. Maybe Purochan had meant material that was not flammable. It was a common mistake to make. It was counterintuitive to think that flammable and inflammable mean the same thing. At this point, the Crown Prince of Hastinapur seemed to be really twisting himself into a pretzel to try to explain Duryodhan and Purochan's actions. But then, Vidur had this final piece of evidence. It was Purochan's calendar that his secretary had accidentally dropped. The entry under next Thursday at 3 in the morning was the most interesting. That would be 3 days after the palace was inaugurated, meaning the Pandavas would be staying there that night. The entry said, "Accidentally drop a lit candle in the southwest corner." And the entry that said, "Call the fire department," was a good 4 hours later, at 7 in the morning. There was no chance anyone in the palace would survive. There was no more debate after that. While Purochan put the finishing touches on the palace, the Pandavas and Vidur also got busy. They got busy with the construction of a tunnel. The tunnel diggers were Vidur's most trusted men. They were smuggled into the palace on the pretext of being Kunti's wardrobe organizers. That excuse made it less likely that Purochan would have looked too closely into the matter. The inauguration of the palace went really well. Dhritarashtra made a big speech about hoping that the palace was warm and toasty, at least as warm as the feelings he had for his favorite nephew. Duryodhan added that he knew that his brothers and the Pandavas had gotten off to a rocky start. But this palace was a symbol, a beacon, a torch, a spark that would lead to melted hearts and warm feelings all around. He also said that he wished Yudhishthir luck as the next in line to the throne. And if and when the time came, Duryodhan said that he would personally serve Yudhishthir for the rest of his life, barring any unfortunate tragedies, of course. The Pandavas and Kunti spent a couple of nights in the palace, and it was, in fact, quite comfortable. Purochan himself had a room in the palace. He said it was in case anything went wrong in these early days. Well, things did go wrong, but only for him. But not for the Pandavas. Wednesday night came, and the Pandavas got the news that the tunnel had just been completed. That was perfect. Now they just had to wait for 3 in the morning. In Purochan's quarters, he was drinking to celebrate prematurely, I guess. He had even invited in a few of his friends. They were 5 of his buddies from his gambling club. And because their mom was visiting and she was passionate about cooking, that brought her along too. She was a huge fan of Purochan, and she had a business idea for a cookbook that she wanted to discuss with him. Meanwhile, Kunti was a little nervous about all of this. She decided to do the thing she always did when she was in a similar situation, and that was prayer. But not the special type of prayer that had earned her her sons decades ago. No, what she was doing was to pray for the general health and safety of her sons. In this elaborate prayer room, there were many gods and goddesses. While lighting the agarbatti or incense stick, she wondered which god or goddess she should pray to. But the decision got made for her pretty quickly. Oops, she said, when she accidentally knocked over the thali that contained the lit agarbatti. That is all it took. There were no fire extinguishers, and even if they were there, Purochan would have made them defective or something. She screamed for her sons. It did not take them long to realize that the schedule had moved up, which meant they were late. They all rushed to Kunti's room and her wardrobe as rehearsed. Their overnight bags were all packed, and they had also taken along some emergency snacks. Purochan had planned for a gap of 4 hours before calling the fire department. Honestly, the way the fire spread, after just half an hour, there was no hope of saving anyone. Purochan and his friends and their mother perished in that fire. The coincidence with the bodies meant that when the forensics department got there, they sadly reported that the Pandavas and Kunti were no more. Dhritarashtra was relieved, and so was Duryodhan. It was a shame that Purochan had also perished. But the new crown prince figured that that was a small price to pay. Karna suggested doing a dental records comparison to make sure that the bodies that were found in the fire indeed belonged to the Pandavas and to Kunti. That it wasn't someone like Purochan's friends or something. But Duryodhan dismissed those thoughts. You're just being unnecessarily suspicious, Karna. Let's figure out who gets to bring snacks to our next club meeting. And more importantly, we need a new name. It can't any longer be about getting rid of the Pandavas when we have got rid of the Pandavas already. Meanwhile, far away, the Pandavas had emerged from the other side of the tunnel into a forest. They were going to face a lot of challenges there. But that is for future episodes. A few notes. We have met Purochan before, but in the Ramayana. That was in episode 190, when, as Prahast, he was part of Ravan's war council. The Lakshagraha was made of lacquer, which is the special substance used as a shiny coating for wood or metal. There are different kinds, and the one that Purochan used was flammable. And for good measure, he used ghee and bamboo and wood. In the original story, Vidar discovered the plot and communicated it to Yudhishthir in a special language that both of them understood. Malecha. That is a word used to refer to a blanket set of languages spoken by foreigners, typically invaders, in India. Previous Mahabharata episodes are linked in the show notes and on the site sfipodcast.com. Check them out. In the next episode, we are doing a Tenali Raman story again. This one features the popular 16th century court jester in a tricky situation again. But this time, he isn't up against the king. He's just trying to protect his money from a thief. Thank you all for the comments on social media and on Spotify's Q&A. I can't directly reply to the questions there, but I'll address them here on this show. Samay and Hari Prasad, thank you for the feedback. Hari Prasad, I had done one episode on Saraswati before. That was episode 134. But I'll be happy to cover more stories of my mom, as you put it. If you have any other comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com, or tweet at sfipodcast, or reply to the questions on Spotify's Q&A. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.